A little background. In her richly detailed sculptures and multi-part installations, Rachel Feinstein investigates and challenges the concept of luxury as expressed in 18th and 19th century Europe in the context of contemporary parallels. By synthesizing visual and societal opposites such as romance and pornography, elegance and kitsch, and the marvelous and the banal, she explores issues of taste and desire. Feinstein's first career survey, Maiden Mother Crone, at the Jewish Museum in New York in 2019 to 2021, presented 3 decades of her sculptures, paintings, and videos, and was accompanied by a major monograph. Titled after 3 consequential stages in a woman's life, the exhibition traced her investigations of masculinity and femininity, balance and precariousness. She is represented, of course, by Gagosian Gallery in New York. Yvonne Owens is a past research fellow at the University College of London and a professor of art history and critical studies. She was awarded the Marie Curie PhD Fellowship in 2005 for her interdisciplinary dissertation on Renaissance portrayals of women in art of the 16th century witch hunt discourses. She holds an honors BA with distinctions in art history of art from the University of Victoria, British Columbia, an MA in medieval studies with distinction from the Center for Medieval Studies at the University of York, UK, and a Master of Philosophy and PhD in History of Art from the University College of London. So, pretty impressive credentials here. Please welcome them.
Thank you very much. Being that I'm the unknown quantity here, I thought I should give some background, a little bit of information about how I came to be involved with Rachel's show Mirror at the Gagosian Gallery in London on Davies Street. Well, it all started with a cold call. Well, actually, it was an email, a very warm email, from Priya at Gagosian here in New York, inviting me to contribute the essay for Rachel's gallery catalog. There followed this adventure, this journey of discovering many affinities, many passions and interests in common, many of them quite bizarre and somewhat arcane, but we'll get to that. So this was the show as it looked from the street outside the gallery. And as the centerpiece, there's this incredibly dynamic, kinetic sculpture, the three-dimensional piece, the only three-dimensional piece in the show, the only sculptural piece. And ironically, the only sculptural piece is based on the only two-dimensional piece used as a source image, as an inspiration for the works in the show. And all the other pieces, all the two-dimensional pieces, are based on sculptural works by 15th and 16th century artists. So that's, I don't know, it's a cunning little inversion. And yeah, quite wonderful.
But I think you were the only person that actually recognized that. I didn't even recognize that I did that. So that was pretty interesting.
You didn't?
No. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. There you go. The paintings, the two-dimensional works, are paintings on mirror. So the viewers inside the gallery and even out on the street could see reflections of, London life going on in the background. And if they came up close to the work, they could see their own reflections there. So that was another sort of inversion or transference. Now, I'd like at this point to, this is one of my favorite photographs of Rachel in her studio. And in the background, there's a work that, and I think that's just the armature, isn't that? That's just the beginning.
Exactly.
Right, and when I first saw it, I thought it was the finished work. I thought it was an abstract piece, but what gripped me was the hands, the gesture of the hands, the fingers, and I recognized it. I recognized it from 16th century work by Grüninger, the Eisenheim altarpiece centerpiece, the crucifixion. Just from those hands, from those fingers, yeah. Well, it's unmistakable, and it really, the sort of the pathos and the agony, and anyway.
And that was more than 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to ask first, is when was the first time you used this Northern Renaissance, this early 16th century art historical sources, to express what you needed to in that moment?
I think this happened using that image of absolute suffering, which is the Grunwald's hands and just everything about that. It was because of September 11th, was because we lived right around the corner from here, and I was making work that was very much based on my childhood in Miami and no art historical references at all. And I wasn't raised in an art historical rich family in that way. So I was making subconscious work, and then witnessing such horrible, just suffering and terror, and it was an overnight, not overnight, like in an instant experience of realizing that this isn't a dream, this is reality, and reality is a lot harsher than even your worst nightmare sometimes. And so for some, my husband's always, John Kern, has always loved art history, and we would go to see museums together, and it never really echoed until that moment where I was like, I get it. Like, looking at a Rembrandt face, and you could see a little bit of the tear in the eye, just everything became about being human, and our experience as people that have witnessed suffering for centuries in all different kind of capacities. So that's what happened, yeah.
And didn't you live just on Franklin Street,
yes.
just down?
Actually, we were on Varick and Watt Street.
Oh.
So, just right above,
Yeah.
like enough to see people jumping out of the towers. That was, yeah.
Yeah. And so for an event like that in 2001, you had to reach far into the past to find any kind of resonance, the same kind of terror and grief and loss and
Absolutely.
catastrophe, human catastrophe.
That's what's always been something for me that's been a big change, especially as I've gotten older, is the idea of somehow not identifying the fact that we all, as humankind, just kind of keep doing the same images and the same iconography and the need for the same connection through a spiritual experience or through images, and how somehow after Warhol, like, you were not supposed to think about that, like whatever came right before, abstract expressionism or something. It was just a very strange experience that abstract expressionism was a way of dealing with the pain from two big world wars, but then you weren't allowed to then show suffering the way people did it for centuries. It's become, so the old-fashionedness, I guess, and the uncoolness also really appeals to me of using these images now, because especially religious ones, people are so freaked out by religious images in the same way they're really freaked out by porn and Rococo images, which are the three other, those are my three things that I use, because it makes people... The deadly triad. It makes people so uncomfortable, because I guess they're identifiable in a way that makes people just think they know it immediately, and then they move on. And I like the person who stops and thinks about, well, why is that there? Why is she doing that? Yeah.
And how is it so very human?
Yes,
All
exactly.
three of those.
It's the connection, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is the Eisenheim altarpiece, centerpiece, and this originally hung in a hospital for people suffering from agonizing skin ailments. Yes. And they would have everything from St. Vitus dance to leprosy or, the later stages of syphilis.
Yeah.
And they'd be suffering, they'd be in great pain. And if you can see this up close, the skin of the Christ figure is just torn and bleeding and agonizing. And this was, meant to give a sense of rapport. And I can see how this gesture.
Yeah, I think that's also why it spoke to me so much, is because my father was a dermatologist.
Oh, right.
Yeah, in Miami before it was Botox, it was dermatology for people that had really serious problems, and he would see people from mostly from South America as his patients that had like crazy worms and things, and he would come back and tell us these insane stories. So the visceral skin quality was just also something that really spoke to me about this image. Yeah.
Right, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's part of the, Rachel and I have a background growing up in Miami, Florida, in common.
I didn't know that you grew up in Miami until we spoke. It's crazy. Yeah.
But I went down the pike about 20 years before Rachel did.
Yeah.
So here's the piece, and so when you presented this, when you showed this piece, people didn't know what to make of it.
No.
Because it wasn't ironic, or it wasn't satirical. Mm-hmm. It was sincere.
Yeah.
But there was the one journalist who did get it.
Yes.
Yeah, could you talk about him?
Also having my last name and making this work, everyone was like, "What are you doing? What's going on?" So he called me up and he wanted to interview me about it, and he was very persistent, because I actually didn't know how to even describe why I wanted to make this work. And he walked in and he wanted me to really own it, and I said, I can't. I just don't know why I made this. But he did identify that I wasn't doing it in an ironic way. But it was still so fresh that I couldn't explain why I was doing it. So he wrote, Stephen Vincent, yes, and he was an art writer who was living in the East Village, and was like a guy wearing a leather jacket. And I remember he was a little disappointed that I wouldn't say I was choosing this image to portray suffering, because it just, I couldn't verbalize that yet. But he knew I was being truthful, and he wrote this beautiful piece that was called The Plywood Intercessor, about how it wasn't ironic and how unusual it was as a contemporary artist to portray actual suffering in the way Grunwald did, in my own way. And he was so moved by September 11th and the occurrences that had happened that he decided to move to Basra to research the war, like independently of any magazine. And he hired a interpreter, and he discovered that there was something happening in the police department where they were getting money from the Americans but giving tips to Al-Qaeda, to where the Americans were. And he published this in the New York Times in an op-ed piece, and he was murdered that very day that it came out. He was brought out to the desert and killed, and his interpreter somehow was able to live through it. And we went to his funeral in the East Village, in the church that burned down a couple of years ago. And his wife has since started a fund to help interpreters in war-torn areas to come back to America for safety. And it's just, that's embedded in this work for me. And it's really, really intense.
It's part of it now.
Yeah.
So now, back to Mirror. The next time you choose early 16th, late 15th century work as your inspiration, of course, at this point, we're in COVID.
Yeah.
And we have a war in Europe. And And so the intensity, the widespread fear and confusion is something of the same tenor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The unknown and the helplessness, and the idea that just terrible things are happening around you that you can't do anything about at all. And
Enormous, just vast occurrences that
which is also how I discovered you, was reading about your experience with big, huge seismic world shifts, and how Hans Baldung Green and the idea of witches, which, I mean, all of that with the fear of the unknown and big things that happen that change the course of the world. Yeah.
Yes, a very similar sort of time frame. The enormity of events, the inexplicable nature of them, fear, terror of sex, of women, of death, of course.
Yes.
And these works that you used as your sources, they're devotional pieces. They're basically depictions of people with great yearning in their posture and their stance, in their expressions, and hope, I guess, is a big part of it.
Yeah, and the idea that you would then look at them and see and become them through those eyes. And so, again, it's the idea of connecting to other beings and other times and just all the suffering that has existed, and how we can have that connection somehow to learn from it and not keep doing the stupid things we keep doing over and over again as people. And that's the original source. So that's Tilman Riemenschneider. It's at 15. I'm always so bad with numbers. I think it's like 15.
I think it was around 1515.
Yeah, that sounds right. Which is the same time as Hans Baldung Green.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They were contemporaries, and yet Riemenschneider looked more medieval, whereas Hans Baldung Green is one of the more bizarre and arcane interests that Rachel and I discovered we have in common.
Yeah.
He was probably the most notorious of Albrecht Dürer's apprentices. He was considered the intellectual among Dürer's apprentices. And he created, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Hans Baldung Green, but he created some of the most absolutely terrifying images of women as witches. Also very erotic.
We're going to see them.
Oh yeah.
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 Let's
get going.
They're crazy. Yeah. These are all these.
They're
images.
crazy. But then these Hans Baldung Green has been called, quite modern in not only his interests but in his execution of his works. Whereas these are much more medieval in their
That's such an
sensibility, much
interesting
more
point.
mystical and
Yeah.
devotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did an Adam and Eve sculpture that was in stone that was pretty, it was the first nude sculpture at the time, but it was still very demure compared to Hans Baldung Green.
Yeah, I
Yes.
know.
Yes.
Hans Baldung Green, we don't get to see any of those images because they don't quite relate to, the mirror show as much. But I'm just going to veer off topic for a second. Was this a study or a mock?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I started these as images of these charcoal drawings on wood, and I didn't really know what I was doing with any of this. It was definitely during deep COVID, and I was looking at the Tilman Riemenschneider images because I've always loved his work so much. But I was making these exact kind of charcoal pastel drawings of his sculpture, and then thinking, well, this isn't really contemporary art. This is just like me making a copy of his sculpture. And I didn't really know what to do about it. And I showed them to John, and he was like, these are amazing. They have so much energy, and they're so weird. And I was like, I know, but I don't really know if this is art. I don't know what to do with it. And then it just kind of morphed into then cutting the eyes out because I made this Hans Baldung Green sculpture where this witch is turning. Did we not put any of the images of the drawings in from the Hans Baldung Green stuff? I can't remember. Oh, we know. Good. Well, you're going to see that soon. Okay. Yeah. So basically, there's this witch that's turning under her body, and when I made it in paper, you couldn't tell that it was a head because it was all made out of wood by the time I was done with it. So I cut her eyes out to make it look like it's a face. Yeah. And by doing that, I was like, this is really cool. Like, it made me think of this movie called Manhunter that was from like the 70s or 80s. It was like an early Red Dragon, like one of those scary, and it was Michael Mann. And the killer would cut people's eyes out and put mirrors like in their eyes. Yeah. And I just thought, that's such a weird idea, like going into your soul.
Yeah.
And so that's how that kind of happened. Yeah.
It made the sculpture, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
It made it very similar to the paintings on mirror.
Yeah.
Because you through the eyes you'd go into another dimension.
That's true. And these are really hard to experience as flat images because you can't really photograph mirrors. Yeah. But when you're there, it's really spooky. Yeah.
But this is Mary Magdalene. I love this one. Yeah. This is based on. And this is the mock-up or the
So that one
sketch.
Was a strange story about this kind of idea of Jungian weird unconscious religious stuff. So I was trying to work on the show for Mirror, and I was asked to do a banner for the Met Opera. I don't think I even told you the story. And the opera was Cinderella. And I've always loved fairy tales, so I thought I'd be a perfect fit. And I couldn't figure out how to make an image of Cinderella. It just wasn't working with what I was doing with these religious iconography of these other saints and things like that. So I turned the Mary Magdalene sculpture into Cinderella for the banner. And I was showing it to my Jungian therapist when I was working on it, and she said, that's so strange because Magdalene and Cinderella have the commonality of their feet. That Magdalene's hair washed Jesus's feet, and Cinderella had the shoe that was put onto her foot, which was the way she was discovered. And on top of it, the idea of the red, black, and white, the idea of fire, soot, and ash is this kind of combination of the alchemical kind of phoenix. And it's just all these weird things that kind of kept happening that were unconscious.
And of having no clothes. This is based on Gabor Erhard.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And his sculpture of Mary Magdalene that we'll see in a minute.
Yes.
Limewood, polychrome painted limewood sculpture. And his work, and then Rachel's piece based on it, treats the legend of Mary Magdalene at the point where Christ is dead, she is a penitent, she goes into the desert and lives as an anchorite or a hermit. She doesn't eat. She doesn't bathe. She doesn't drink water. She doesn't do any of that stuff. She is a total ascetic. But the angels clothe her. They make her hair grow really long and cover her body for modesty. And in some versions of the story, she actually grows a pelt of fur. Yes. And in other versions of the story, she develops goat's legs that are covered in fur with hooves. So, just her legs, not her arms. And a group of angels comes every day and carries her up into heaven, where she's fed on heavenly manna and rejuvenated and kept clean and healthy every day. Sometimes as many as 7 times a day. And that's what the original sculpture is dealing with. But here, Rachel has made her sort of ruddy and earthy and grounded and very physical. The 16th century sculpture is very ethereal. She's very pale. She's just
Yeah,
white.
She really is. And
She's not earth tones.
And I read recently that the Nazis took her because, of course, she symbolized their idea of perfect
They called
Germanic
her the beautiful
purity.
German.
Yeah, it's really, really pretty intense, the whole background with Magdalene and that sculpture. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, where is that sculpture? Maybe it comes later.
okay.
Yeah, just
This is Joseph of Arimathea with Christ.
Nicodemus, yeah.
Oh, Nicodemus.
That's right, Nicodemus. It's more of these saints. And they were always these passive watchers with then the dynamic sculpture that I can't wait for you to show the ball dung images. That's the original.
Yeah. So much source material in this piece. So, yet another interesting common, fairy tales.
Yeah.
These are, we're going to see a sequence of still images from Rachel's early films. And this one, I seem to remember that in the film, that sort of heaping mound there was very...
It would hump me.
Yes.
It was motorized to actually...
It was humping you.
I was the sleeping beauty that was being raped by the prince, basically, while I was sleeping.
There's a lot going on under there.
Yes. And that was something that I remember we were talking about, too, the idea of like the three subjects that Orthodox religions don't really like very much: the body, the feminine, and the act of independent will, and how that's always been something, those three, that I like a lot.
But can you tell the real story of Sleeping Beauty?
Yeah, so that was something that I discovered when I was at college, was the story of Talia and the Sun and the Moon, which was 16th century, and it was a Naples writer who was an alchemist himself, and he wrote that Sleeping Beauty was actually put into a coma, I think with the help of her father, because he didn't want her to be a menstruating, independent young woman who was going to go off and get married and have children. He liked her being on the verge of that young girl not ready to go out in the world. So she went into this coma with the little piece of wheat underneath her finger, and then the whole kingdom just kind of fell apart, and there was a big demise a couple of years later, maybe 100 years later, I can't really remember, but it gets covered in black thorny bushes, kind of like the way it does in The Sleeping Beauty from Walt Disney, the old movie. And a traveling king comes along and hacks his way in to sleep in the night and sees this girl, young woman, sleeping, and he rapes her, and she never wakes up. And he goes on his way, and about 9.5, 10 months later, her body births a boy and a girl, fraternal twins, and they crawl their way up her body to suckle from her breasts, and one of them sucks out the little piece of flint underneath her fingernail, and then she wakes up. And then she cares for these children. He comes back to rape her again and discovers her with his children, and he brings her back to his kingdom, and his own wife tries to kill her and the children by feeding them to the husband. It turns into a totally different story. And the whole point is that's so fascinating is that it's not what the Sleeping Beauty is that as young girls we're taught, which is wait around, lie there until a guy comes and wakes you up. Which is a hugely different message. And so that's where all this kind of comes from for me, was that sinister side of fairy tales. And
the original, the authentic story is more one of endurance, through some pretty grisly events.
Yeah. And of course, with my dad being a doctor, he helped me research way before pre-internet medical journals of women who were raped in comas who actually gave birth to children. And they walked into a room and they found a baby suckling on a woman's breast. So there's actually cases that are documented of this.
Wow. And I bet there were in history too.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
how the story comes, because it is, in a very dark way, quite miraculous.
A baby will find its way to the milk.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
It's like a kangaroo baby.
Yeah.
So this takes some explaining. At least, with nice, winsome
This is
young
just
girl
all,
on a
this is,
swing.
Yeah, I guess it's all background pictures of just showing. This was at Skowhegan when I was 21, and it was a piece called Someday My Prince Won't Come, and it was a big hoop skirt that had a big bowl of wine up at the top, and I started swinging in it, and all the wine started just pouring down all over me. And it's, again, the religious and the side of the woman's body being filthy, and all the menstrual magic stuff, which I'm excited to get into.
And I don't know, can I tell the story about your application to the visual art department? Was that graduate studies
That was
at Yale?
Yeah, a lot of ways.
So Rachel shows up.
Yeah.
She shows up for the interview, and she's wearing a minute, see-through vinyl skirt or something.
Yeah.
And a T-shirt that says, "I'm a satisfier." and this portfolio.
I think there's and I was wearing a pubic merkin that looked like that. That was my look. That was, what was it? Yes, and so basically the whole thing is when I got there, I went in for my interview thinking, they're gonna love this, and I was completely attacked by the head of the department at the moment, saying, "What is this? Is this about third wave feminism?" And I'm like, "No, this is just how I dress." And I didn't get in, regardless. And many years later, I was certain it was because of the head of the department, and I found out it was the female students. They actually boycotted me, which is a very other interesting twist to all the whole women not being together and making things better for each other.
Women
and actually,
attacking other women.
Yeah, so.
But then you are kind of a triple threat.
Yeah, that was one of the pieces.
I could hardly look at this one.
This was called The Ultimate Woman.
Yeah. Orifices all over the place.
This was what I was doing when I was 18 and 19 years old at Columbia University. I still have these scars. I put myself in all those plaster bandages, and then I couldn't get out. I had to have people come and use razor blades to get me out. It was not a good idea.
I think we have your father to blame for this.
Yes, that was all also his materials. He sent it all up to me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Just these crazy, they're crazy. This is all background. This is this movie that I made called Grenzel. So I changed myself from this sculpture. I think you have the next visions of myself turning into my real person from that sculpture. And it's part of the movie. This was me at 20 or 21 years old. And then going into the next one, which was my mouth, then becoming the mouth of that sculpture. It was really a crazy movie. And my husband actually met me in this stage, and I'm like, wow, the fact that you were able to see through that pretty intense. And then the body image then turned into these kind of coming back to feeling both the horror and the power of the woman and the woman's body. And a really good friend of ours who's an art collector just said, "Why did you make them look so beat up?" And I'm like, I don't really see them as beat up. I see them kind of as I see myself.
Well, these are from the Secrets exhibition, Gagosian in LA.
Yeah.
And they're based on Victoria's Secret runway models.
Exactly. With Donatello. The mixture of Donatello and Victoria's Secret.
The other
So
side.
the bases, the weird bases, are from Donatello's Magdalene sculpture in Florence, and they're the exact same size as the Magdalene. And then there's 4 that are based on the Donatello David, which are these ones. And so it's the idea of the sculptural aspect of your body. Like, are you interested in it? If it's a little bit smaller than life, it's a little sexualized. And if it's a little bit larger lens, it's a little bit grotesque and scary. It's this weird thing that you could do as a sculptor where you can affect people's like body vortex in a way, you know?
Are these slightly overscale?
No, those, so it's hard to tell in photograph. Those are exactly the same size as Donatello's David.
Okay.
So that one, I can't remember, I think it's 54 inches or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, you know, the sort of this Greek kind of motile,
Like chorus or something.
yeah,
Yeah. I love
stepping
that.
forward,
I love that too.
and
yeah.
the contrapposto here,
Yeah.
Donatello.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah,
See the little bass and the whole thing.
Donatello's Mary Magdalene
Yeah.
with her. He didn't have her growing a furry pelt
Yeah.
or turning into, you know, goat limbs, but
Yeah.
and he doesn't have her hair as you know, her head hair is such a feature, but he puts her in a sort of a cloak of hair.
And the fact that she's in wood versus bronze, she has this like dried out, desiccated
Yeah.
feeling to her. It just
Yeah.
really,
Because he didn't include the part, the legend where, you know, she's taken up into heaven every day to be rejuvenated, but he shows her in her later years
that's a good point.
as an anchorite or a hermit, and as the old woman, the crone.
Yeah, look at that. That's
Yeah.
such an incredible sculpture.
Yeah.
And then there she
And
is.
here's, yeah,
That's the beautiful Magdalene. Yeah.
this is the Erhard Mary Magdalene, the one that gets rejuvenated every day and remains young and beautiful, who's wearing
again,
nothing but her hair.
The two different views of women, you know, just how one is this perfect specimen and the
Yeah.
other one is this desiccated version. And I think in a lot of ways, you see yourself that way every day as a woman. You just have these moments, you're like, oh, you know, I'm her or I'm the other one, you know, just this constant going back
Depends
and
on the
forth.
time of day. For
Yeah.
me. My mirror playing tricks on me.
Which is also this whole other interesting, weird sideline is that, you know, having been a fashion model and then also being a model for my husband's painting, there's this other weird aspect to me as an artist that I then myself am a muse. And I can see myself completely outside of being the artist.
Yeah.
I am myself the artwork. And it's just a really weird thing. So I'm constantly going back and forth all the time between always doing two sides. Yeah. Yeah, this is an amazing sculpture. I think this is Erhard too.
Yes, and it's the three ages of women.
Yeah.
So we have the aged crone
Yeah.
and the youthful ingenue
Yes.
and the matron.
And the vanitas, the aspect of when you're young and beautiful, the next death is just right there.
Just right around the
Yeah.
corner. Yeah. Just waiting. This is Hans Baldung Green's Three Ages of Women with Death. Well, and the youthful one is actually just a little infant baby.
Yeah, you see down there.
With the sinister looking owl
Yeah.
there. And sort of the death bird.
Yes.
And the older woman seems to be, it's like Cinderella ripping her dress off, ripping her bows off. Except in this case, it looks more like a winding sheet.
Yeah, I never noticed that actually. Huh.
So, can you tell us the story?
This is just another kind of. I was asked to be in a show that was about Mary Magdalene, and I painted myself as Mary Magdalene. I think I just had Flora, my third child. So I was breastfeeding and I was feeling totally out of body and the whole thing was really weird. And I had three kids and three pregnancies and 3 breastfeedings. You're just kind of like, wow, what is going on with my body at this point? And I don't know, for some reason this was, again, looking at the mirror, looking at myself making this painting, and the vanitas aspect of it too. Yeah. And being aware that this is a very changing moment for me, you know.
Classical trope, memento mori.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And vanitas, because, you have this, this womanly pulchritude,
Yes.
beauty, but, right around the corner.
Yep. Yeah, and then I was making these before that. So it's always this idea of being aware, even when I was very young, of maybe because Miami had all this kind of jungle rot all the time, and you couldn't have a fancy house without the animals coming in.
Yeah.
There's just nothing you could do about
Insects.
it. Insects.
Roaches
yeah.
this big.
The giant flying palmetto bugs,
Yeah.
you know. Remember John, the first time he came and visited my family, like my mom had a lot of parrots, and they were so there's a lot of bird food everywhere. So there was a lot of insects and a lot of bugs, all because of this bird food. And he walked in the bathroom in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and there were flying cockroaches.
Yeah.
And then there were lizards catching the flying cockroaches, and he was just like, "Oh my God!" You know, it's just a very unreal place to grow up as a child.
Remember
know?
the giant toads?
Oh yeah, my dog died.
Yeah,
from
they're
eating
so
one of
toxic
those.
that if a dog
Yeah.
makes the mistake of biting it, they're done for. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. So these are just basically more of those vanitas kind of aspects of getting older and also being aware of the different ages. Even when I was young, I was making these when I was, I think, in my early mid-30s. Yeah.
This looks very much like a fairy tale image to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
these are these wonderful women that I hired, and I posed all of them to stage these photographs. Yeah. It's another one that was Eva. Yeah.
Very 18th century fairy tale.
Yeah.
Charles Perrault.
Absolutely.
Fairy tales.
Yeah, more
And
studies.
this is a film still.
Film studies. This was just early stuff again from the old. If you show the next one, I'll be basically it was from a dream where I was an old witch, and then I become a young woman, and then I become the old witch again. This was from when I was 23 when I made this movie. So the themes keep coming. You know, that's the thing, is that you have these little weird little moments of your childhood that somehow influence everything for the rest of your life. You know.
Well, and the crone and winter, and the witch's hut.
Yes. Yes.
And this
here we
brings
get
us
go.
to
Yes. Now we
Hans Baldung Green,
Yes.
and this very famous image of his, simply called Witch's Sabbath, from 1510. This was his inaugural print. It was a woodblock print. Here is the chiaroscuro.
It's amazing.
Do you like that, Donna? Yeah. Anyway, this was his flagship, and he built his career on this very image. He launched it. He was instantly famous. Works by him were hugely in demand because the witch hunt was just really getting going. The second book ever printed on the Gutenberg printing press after the Bible, the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of the Witches, was a bestseller. And by the way, it's still in print.
Wow.
And so there's just huge interest, and especially in the city of Strasbourg, Hans Baldung's city. And these images have, I mean, you've lived with these images
I love them
for
so
a long
much.
time.
I love hearing you talk about them too, because you know so much more about them than I do.
Well, what I want to point out is, your early fascination with aging, with memento mori, with vanitas themes, with the crone, the maiden, mother, and crone.
Yep.
For Hans Baldung Green, the crone is always the most powerful witch, the scariest witch, the worst witch. She's always central in groupings that include the three ages of women. She's central. She's backgrounded. She'll be doing the worst magic. Who knows what she's doing? She's holding up a platter of, it could be, baby limbs or something awful.
And before that, there was no references to witches in this way, right? He kind of came up with this.
He did.
Yeah.
He sort of set the tone until this day.
Wow.
So your aged Disney witches, or the Wizard of Oz, the wicked witch of the which was the wicked one? The one from the east? The west. Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Wicked Witch of the West, right.
That's all comes from him.
Yeah, it really is. It changed the status.
Yeah, there's the
Of
crone
old
in the
women.
background, right in the middle
Yeah.
again, like you said. Yeah.
There she is. She's so powerful, she can just fly under her own steam. Oftentimes he'll have the aged witch figure supporting one of the younger ones with her hand on their back or their buttocks or something.
Wow.
Sort of, pushing them along into evil, into dastardly deeds, skulls, bones, and vessels, polluted vessels, because the vessel is a cipher for the womb, for the vulva. And the vessels will very often be
There it is. That's
spewing
Metal Storm.
fire. Yeah.
Yep, that's the Metal Storm sculpture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the one that
And the eyes, see, her eyes are peering out underneath you. So when I made that into a wood sculpture, you wouldn't know what that was until I cut the eyes out.
Yeah. So there was a legend that if a young woman should look behind her, between her legs, upside down, she would see one of two things. She'd either see the devil or her beloved.
Wow.
The man she would marry.
I didn't
One of the
know
two.
that. Wow. That's amazing. Wow.
So, and the way that Baldung has this set up,
That's amazing.
the way that Baldung has this set up is who the figure that this witch would be seeing is the male viewer, because it was assumed that the only viewers of these works would be male collectors. A very sort of elite enclave of
Which is also so fascinating.
educated
They were very
humanists.
educated
Yeah.
viewers who didn't believe in witches.
Not
right?
necessarily, but they did believe in the inherent, the feminine defect, the Aristotelian feminine defect, the inadequacy of women that was evidenced by their menstruation. So
And they also were titillated by the whole aspect of it as well.
very.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so she has her hand, over her pudenda,
Yeah.
and the other hand holding the fire-breathing vessel above, which makes them visual synonyms. But the aged figure, she's the one in the background there. She's the one who's spurring the others.
She's holding them both.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes, but also for the improperly processed fire that is menstruation. In the humanist, the medicine that relies on the four humors, improperly processed fire is woman's defect, and it results in her menstruation.
Wow.
So it's lust. They're lustful because they menstruate and they're inferior, and they aren't, sort of like virtuous, like men. Ver meaning male.
They can't control their bodies.
Yeah. Exactly. They can't control them. They're out of control. They just sort of bleed. Not because you cut them or, you're in a war or something. They just bleed. This is a copy after Baldung and the aged witch, once again, holding the strange vessel with the fiery stuff coming out of it. That's a synonym for the womb. All the witch's paraphernalia in the foreground, the fluffing brush, honestly, by which they were supposed to apply, flying ointment or to their nether regions.
Wow.
Oh, and I want to point this out, the goat in the back,
Yes.
And often there are cats, like this cat is reading a book of magic. And lots of fiery stuff coming out of the nether regions and you know.
So
And
basically, they're almost all being seen inside almost a woman's body themselves.
Yeah.
It's like a cave of the uterus or something like that. That it's just
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And the oldest witch, once again, flying under her own steam up on on a pitchfork in the sky. This one's actually lighting a wand, her torch from the fire issuing from between her thighs.
You see that?
It's
It's amazing. I've never noticed that until just now. Is it a fart that she's lighting it with?
No, that's the fire and steam of her menstruation.
Oh my God.
And it's, you know, it's so volatile that she can light her torch from it.
Wow.
See that little spark there? and the cat is vomiting, you know. So that's how we know that, you know, we're talking about a pussy here.
That is so funny.
But look at the crone in that background.
Yeah, geez, my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And notice those are not all wieners on that roasting stick there.
What is that?
Well, the one that the old crone has her hand on is very clearly a penis and testicles.
Yes.
And, you know, because of the story that what the saying was, a witch could steal a man's tackle out of his breeches without him even knowing. And then she would put it in a box or maybe a bird's nest and feed it oats and hay.
Then what would happen to it?
Well, they would just sort of move around by themselves, and you know, and sometimes men would go looking for their stolen, you know, gear. And there's a wonderful story about, this was a famous story, it was told by very many witchcraft, you know, pastors, really, clerics, about one priest who went looking for his, you know, stolen tackle. And and he was told where it was. It was up in a bird's nest along with a bunch of others. And he climbed out and he recognized it because his was the biggest. So.
That's so funny. That is so amazing.
And so these are all the stories. They were very popular in Hans Baldung Green. How can you tell that it's pollution, it's feminine pollution we're talking about? This is a drawing that Baldung made for a collector, a commissioned drawing. And it's called Defecating Woman.
That's so amazing.
Because, you know, stuff coming out of the nether regions, it's all the same kind of.
Wow.
But I guess this was a turn on to the collector.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Oh, the poochie, the little babies.
Yes.
Yeah. They're all over the place. No, the little babies are, they're stuck in there so that you will know that the artist and the collector of the piece are classical humanists, that they're very erudite, that they're very educated, that they know their Greek and they know their, you know, Latin, and because their references to the little kind of putti or baby figures that would be in classical sculptures.
That's amazing.
Yeah, those little roly-poly babies that are, you know, that's why they're there. And, well,
this image is insane.
This one's been interpreted many ways.
Can you believe this is from 15?
This is 1514. This is one of a group that he did that are really sort of shockingly, this was considered pornographic. It wasn't shown for hundreds of years. It was in a cabinet collection, very exclusive elite cabinet collection. And it's been called Witch and Dragon, but I thought that that's actually a basilisk, because there was the story about how witches fed basilisks.
What is a basilisk?
A basilisk is a fabulous creature, a mythological creature, who's so deadly and poisonous that they can, it's like the Medusa, they can petrify you with their glands.
Wow.
You know, they're very deadly. And or with their eyes. with their evil eye. So, and witches were supposed to feed basilisks as their familiars with their menstrual blood.
So that's what's happening. That's what.
Because
That's a stream.
his tongue is under the stream. So
Yes.
it's not it was always thought to be some kind of, bestial cunnilingus.
Yes, that's what I always thought was happening until
Yeah.
I read your book, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's not. And then
Yeah.
I love your description of the creature's not actually scary looking either. He's kind of,
He's friendly.
yeah, he's friendly.
He's like her pet. He's,
And then
having
also-
dinner. Or
And then the weird ending of his tail is it kind
Yeah.
of looks like almost like a uterus, or you were describing
well, it looks like one of your orifices.
yeah, it's a
like
strange,
it's an orifice.
yes.
Yeah. And she's stoking it with that leafy wand. And this stoking is as good a word as
Yeah,
any.
totally.
And there's this plume of, smoke and fire and steam rising.
Yeah.
And the energy of whatever's going on here, of this dynamic, is so great that her hair is, it's like she's in front of a wind machine. It's just blasting her hair back. And this, this wasn't just Hans Baldung Green creating that. This is by Urs Graf, and this is an illustration for a very prestigious book for the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian, and it illustrates a story of Virgil, when Virgil had, in his old age, in his dotage, he'd fallen in love with the princess, this young girl. And he courted her, but she rejected him, she scorned him. So in revenge, he caused all the fires in Rome to go out. And so the only fire available in the entire city was the fire coming out of her vagina. So then they were forced, all the, the centurions, all the people were forced to light their torches from the fire coming out of her vagina, of course, which was, she had to do it because it was her civic duty. But it was a great humiliation for her, so
Oh my
it
gosh.
was a good revenge.
amazing.
And this is the kind of illustration that, the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian
That's amazing.
desired.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is an illustration for a book of sermons by Geiler von Kaisersberg. And it was a book of sermons. He was a very popular preacher in the city of Strasbourg, which was also Hans Baldung's city.
Yeah.
And in this book, the two illustrations that are clearly by Baldung or his shop were this one of witches and one of werewolves, because lycanthropy was, another big result of consorting with witches. You'd turn into a werewolf.
Wow.
And then you'd just go around the countryside eating everybody's kids.
Which also is so interesting. It's all in Germany.
Yeah.
Just the whole thing with Germany and the Black
German
Forest,
yeah.
and I mean, it's just incredibly
Yeah.
intense.
Well, when I went to Strasbourg,
yeah,
and I climbed up to, the roof of the Strasbourg Cathedral, and you can see all around. The city it's like in a bowl, and it's surrounded by mountains, and there's sort of storms over there, and there's all this weather that you can see. And I suddenly said, whoa, no wonder they believed in witches. This is crazy.
it's really intense.
Yeah. So, back to Mirror and this piece, and its kineticism, and its volatility, and its fire. Metal storm.
Metal storm, yeah. And there's her eyes. You can see her
There's
eyes.
her little cutout eyes.
Yeah, yeah. And just everything that you wrote about, and the idea of the women, the doers we talked about, that women who would actually be healers and be able to do things other than just be wives or nuns were witches. They were the only ones who could actually do something in society and not be. And then after the Gutenberg Bible and then the How to Kill a Witch, somehow they were seen as dangerous.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in the idea of technology somehow opening up things for the world, but making things really bad for women, like how social media is basically hurting very young girls. Just things that you think are good, sometimes are not so good.
Yeah.
You know?
They have
Yeah.
a shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
What you said about women in the Renaissance being active outside of the home, working, entering into industries, alewives. They began very strongly in that industry, and then they were pushed out. Midwives began very strongly, but then they were defamed and called witches and pushed out. There was an entire order of lay nuns, the Beguines, who basically they worked. They were a working order. They were a lay order. They provided healing and medicine and food and just good works in the community, and everybody adored them. And they went along quite well for a couple of hundred years, but eventually the church called them before the Inquisition, and they didn't last long after that because they were associated with witches.
Yeah, and that's also the interesting thing is how art is the thing that disrupts the idea of the Inquisition. Art stopped that whole kind of putting women down eventually. Yeah.
So this is the other piece that when I looked at it, I went, oh, I could track it from its gesture, from its movement, even though you've exploded the two-dimensional drawing in your version into the three dimensions and into all kinds of aspects and expressions that were impossible, that couldn't be in the source drawing.
Like you see this strange little stunted, like geometric looking leg, that her leg ends in this weird little, it's because that's where the drawing ends.
Yeah.
So on the other side, her leg doesn't go anywhere, so I decided not to make it up and just have it end in that little kind of little thing. It's really funny and interesting to try to change a flat object into a three-dimensional object. And there's the hag's nipple, which is my favorite on the side, to get to see it from that aspect. Yeah. And these are all started as drawings of the original drawing. And of course, I can't even compare to Hans Baldung's drawing, so it's a little bit hard for me to, but I don't want to use his drawing and cut up his drawing. I use my own version. And then I turn it into a three-dimensional paper model with just, hot glue guns and stuff like that. And then that becomes what the final wood version. And we're turning this into a bronze sculpture that's going to live outside, which I'm very excited about because that's going to be crazy to see in some forest somewhere, to come across that, Yeah. So that's what we're in the middle of doing right now.
Yeah. Well, that nipple is very important.
Yes.
Because, with the aged crones, the hags, they always have really droopy breasts and really long nipples.
And one of them had like lots of hairs coming out of it too.
That's your dad again.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
But it's so fantastic no matter which angle you look at it from. It's just got so much going on, all about volatility and fire. Is it virtuous fire? Is it cleansing fire? Or is it profane fire? Is it polluting fire? And I think, as with your Mary Magdalene, when you took the subject in hand, so to speak, and just developed it in the ways that you did, in each case, it ended up redeeming the subject because, these these witches, in all of the mirror show, all of those figures with the mirror eyes and the expressions of yearning and longing and hope and some doubt, confusion, consternation, certainly, but there's hope. And in your versions, with the mirror and with all the life going on in the background, wherever they're exhibited, the contemporary life, the now, that's hopeful. And this is hopeful when it's exploded like this. It's just all about activity and the fiery action, the dynamism, the movement of those flames becomes hopeful, aspirational.
That's nice to hear. I mean, also, you could love how Hans Baldung drew and how he made things and how I'll never get to do what he wants, but he's dead and I'm alive. That's the hopefulness there. Is like, we know we at least are experiencing life, we're not a ghost. And so you could look at what they did, but you are the person living right now, and you might as well try to interpret it through your own eyes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, brava.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and doing this.
My pleasure.
Does anyone have any questions? We have time for questions? I don't know if we do. And there's also a new book that just came out that we have today yes, thank you. Hi. Hello. I will.
I think the Renaissance is such a great idea. I'm just curious if you thought about patina yet.
Patina, that's actually been the big sore spot right now. I don't know how I want to make it look like it's got the wood grain, but of course you can't do that with the patina, and I don't think I'm going to fake it. So we're trying to figure that out right now. I've never done a bronze, actually. This is my first one. So we'll find out.
Then it truly will be Metal Storm.
Yes, exactly. Which is a Metallica song? Where's Metal Storm come from? A Judas Priest song, I think, right?
I think Richard Phillips came up with that.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, Mate.
So, of course, I'm interested in the whole stolen genitalia part.
Yes.
Story. So, where is the nose? You know, the novel where the nose then wanders around St. Petersburg. And
I don't know that.
No.
But I think
it's a famous Russian novel.
Well, you know what they say about
These
noses.
stories are all of these Ukrainian horror folk tales,
Yeah,
which are really scary.
very scary.
Very, very scary. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's any sort of connection that you know of to say, I mean, it's the nose which is the
Yeah.
phallic
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden,
I would think that in these stories in that novel and the folklore, the fairy tale upon which it possibly draws, that are usually very sophisticated in their the ways that they refer to other body parts and symbolize certain activities. I think that there's a relationship. I noticed when I read all my life, when I read fairy tales, much as you did, I always noticed that the Eastern European ones were terrifying. They were so scary, like the Sleeping Beauty stories, just brutal, but so magical, because really it's more as if they're transcribed shamanistic transformation tales. They're wonder tales that owe nothing to propriety or anything like that. They're just wild, savage. Yeah.
The idea of not having to worry about what other people think.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the problem with being a woman, I guess, is that you have to you have to behave, which has always been the thing that's been really interesting, is the need to be a good girl has always been something that I've been really intrigued with and hate about myself, but also realize it's somehow an important part of you're either meant to do that as a young girl or you do it naturally. That's what I'm trying to figure out, you know?
I remember a phase when I really got quite puritanical, and not just puritanical, but purist, you know. I was a stickler, but then it passed. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, menstrual magic, yes.
Would have driven myself crazy.
Hi.
I was wondering, when you're making the sculpture and it's kind of paper and hot glue coated, very movable, what is it? Is it a feeling or is it an intellectual where you know that like two parts of the sculpture fit together like the correct way? Because I assume that those pieces, there are like hundreds of thousands of different ways they put the angles together.
Yeah.
How do you sort of make those decisions where you're like, now the leg's in the right place, so this is the most.
Sometimes the leg is not in the right place. And I've had to revisit the work, and that's been a little bit of a pain in the ass sometimes, but it's strange. I don't really know how it works. It somehow, I've always thought that I'm the least mathematical person in the entire world, and I stopped doing math probably in the 10th grade. But there are these bizarre, like a beautiful mind, like I see the numbers, and it's like, it's a very strange thing where they fit together in this very puzzle, jigsaw, strange, magical, mathematical, like I'm super autistic, but I can completely see it. Like they're very strange, and they work. I can't do it in wood because it's too hard. I have to do it in paper because I can keep changing things around, and it's easy to make mistakes. And so the whole creases in the wood is the creases in the paper, where I'll just fold it, and and sometimes I'll make a couple different versions, and I'll choose the best one, but usually it starts from the drawing to the paper model pretty seamlessly. Yeah, it's a weird, my whole life I've always thought, wow, I'm terrible at math and numbers, but then these are really crazy, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I've always wondered how you do that.
Yeah.
That's a strange kind of mind.
It is, and it doesn't work in normal ways sometimes. So, yeah, basically, they start off just the same size as my paper, like an 8.5 by 11 or 12 by 14 or something, and then I've gotten better at this. So before I actually start gluing it together, I'll do a scan of all the cut pieces. So I will have the final version of what the pieces are going to be that I just blow up with a projector to the exact scale that I come up with later. And I learned that from doing the Marc Jacobs runway show, actually. Working with the team of all the professional fashion people, I was making all these paper models that they were gonna make big, and they were the ones who were like, why don't you just scan those cut pieces before and we'll just laser cut the whole thing? I was like, great idea. Because I'm not a tech person, and so that was a really wonderful epiphany, yeah. Yeah, John?
Do you there's something goofy about making a 3D sculpture by folding up the two-dimensional, you know, is there any deeper meaning there for you as an anti-hero, as an unmasculine or unheroic way of, in the sense of, you know, Michelangelo, you know, just took away everything that wasn't the sculpture and the stuff, that kind of thing. You know,
that's a good point.
And the whole gigantic forearms
Yeah.
doing the stuff.
Yeah.
Is there any association for you, or echo for you, of it being a parody of the heroic male sculptor, or is that just something that I'm?
No, I think it probably is, but without being conscious of it. Well, first of all, my brain doesn't work by the idea of subtractive sculpture. Like, I've actually tried to have a block of something and tried to carve it, and I always carve too much, and then I can't put it back, and then it's completely done, and I love that additive. I love being able to keep adding things and then taking it away again, and adding and taking away, and that's about drawing. Like with drawing, you can, Matvey does these beautiful sumi things. I'm always like, how can you do something if you mess up? That's it, you can never do it. I always mess up, and I always erase or put another piece on or change it. And I like to have the ability to keep going back and forth all the time and live with the mistakes. And I think like someone like the big male sculptors, it's always about the size and the heft. And I said this before, like I remember hearing about how they had to shut down the whole Hudson River or something to take a Richard Serra sculpture and put it. And I was like, I would feel like so worried that there was like holding up people in traffic, you know? I would be thinking about all the people that were stuck and they were late for work. Like how different my mind works about worrying about putting people in like, you know, some kind of crisis for my own like neurosis or something, you know? So I think the wonkiness has to do with that as well. The idea of it being a sculpture, but it's also still pretty frail in a way that it looks like it's still paper and it's rickety. So I've never made bronze because of the eternity side of it hasn't been something I've been interested in. Yeah, I talked to Ursula about this a lot too. Like this.
It's interesting that the early environmental artists, you know, like Sarah, they would more seek to impose their vision upon the landscape, whereas contemporary environmental artists are always, they're working more with ephemeral art. Or,
Sarah Z's beautiful piece, you know, it's like this whole thing of like these using what's in the landscape, then imposing your will onto it. So that's a really nice point.
Yeah, especially the ones that, you know, they gently change or erode or go away entirely. Makes them more precious.
Yes. Ursula and Sarah's piece at Storm King are so beautiful because they definitely experience the different, seasons, and they change, and it's just, that I wonder if that's just a female male thing, or is that a new contemporary thing versus a different? I don't know. You know, it's fascinating, the idea of the changing body, and that you accept it. You know, another thing that we talked about, I know probably everyone needs to leave, but this idea of a menopause and menstrual magic being gone, and that women who have been lucky enough to be artists the professional, really famous ones, seem to become famous after menopause. And men, a lot of times, who have had the energy from being sexual kind of beings younger on in life, like have a panic attack, and like kind of especially someone like Picasso, where it was so much about his virility, and then you all see all the satyr works that he did. You could tell he was like panicking. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my edge. And that once women have lost the yoke of reproduction, it's almost like they can just now really see things in a different way, and they can do what they need to do, you know?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because the whole mythology around witches, which was tied into, you know, the natural philosophy, humanism, the four humors, the science, the medicine, the theology of the day, had it that the older witches were more powerful because they didn't menstruate, and so the menstrual power backed up.
Wow.
Made them extra evil.
Wow.
And powerful, and it could come out of their eyes as the evil eye.
That's so awesome.
So, you know, aged female artists.
That's so great. We got a lot to go, girls.
Something to look forward to.
Totally, absolutely. On that note, we should probably let you guys all have some food that is not menstrual magic. Thank you. Good. Thank you.